Welcome to the webinar series of 21st Century Teachers with the theme Teaching in the New Normal. The goal of this series is to make teachers adapt and become relevant under the new normal. We would like to remind everyone on the following. A certificate of participation will only be given to those who will stay through the entire session and completely answer the evaluation assessment afterwards. Before we begin today's webinar, let us give respect to the singing of the Philippine National Anthem, followed by a short prayer.
bayan ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Let us put ourselves in the holy presence of God. Father in heaven, always merciful and giver of life, we humbly ask that you bless each one of us, from the speakers, program committees, guests, and participants. Guide us to make better decisions as we incorporate what we will learn throughout this activity. Thank you for the infinite blessings and countless opportunities. Lord, today as we start our activity, may we always be grateful to learn new things. Shed the light of your wisdom and bless each one, especially our speakers, as they will share their knowledge to us. Through your mercy and grace, may peace and utmost understanding shine and dwell unto us. Almighty God, accompany each one and help us concentrate for us to gain more knowledge as we listen attentively. This we ask in your name. Amen.
And for the actual learning, let us all welcome Dr. Lito A. Palomar, OIC Director 3 from the Bureau of Learning Delivery, DepEd Central Office, for his topic, the Interim Guidelines for Assessment and Grading in light of the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan, or the DepEd Order Number 31 Series of 2020.
Magandang gabi natin.
Good evening,
Dr. Tayo. Yes, good evening, Miss 21st Century Teacher. Good evening po sa ating mga nanonood. Medyo malakas ang ulan ngayon, ano? Kaya medyo nagproblema tayo sa connection. I hope tuloy-tuloy. Kamusta, Miss 21st Century?
Okay naman po, and sobrang excited na ata ng mga viewers natin. We have 876 currently watching po ng live stream po natin.
Yes, and ilan yung registered natin sa
And for the registration, we have 5,032.
Di ba? Ang dami, 5,000. So, sana may matutunan. Yes, please,
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead pa.
Yeah, yun. Ang dami nag-register. In-update kasi ako ni Miss 21st Century Teacher ng registration for the past 2 days. Kasi halos 2 days lang naman natin na-post yung announcement. Because we have been really waiting, for the national orientation of the interim policy to be concluded, para makita na lang natin, ma-address siguro yung nakikita nating gaps just in case i-roll out siya pababa. So, more or less yun yung topic natin sa araw na ito. Pero ayun nga, medyo kahit 2 days lang natin i-post yung announcement that we have 5,000 plus registrants. So, congratulations, Miss 21st Century.
The floor is yours, sir. Thank you so much po.
Okay, so siguro pwede na mag-start. Okay, so again, welcome. Medyo na yung sarili ko sa sa screen natin at medyo medyo hindi maganda yung panahon natin. So, I hope everyone is well and good, and welcome to our discussion of the interim policy on classroom assessment in the light of BLCP for this specific school year. So without further ado, may I share my screen now? So I'd like to say hi to all who are watching us right now. I'll share my screen now for everyone. Yeah. May I have a signal if you can hear me? Hello po?
Yes, sir. Opo. Okay na po yung screen.
So yeah, how about my audio? Okay na si audio?
Medyo naririnig naman po pero hindi siya ganun kabuo.
Okay. Tingnan natin, no? Okay, siguro lakasan na lang natin. Baka nagkakaproblema tayo sa audio. Anyway, okay. Before I start, because I asked Miss 21st Century Teacher if we can um, share our advocacy for our brothers and sisters in Bicol. Kasi we have been engaging to several activities sa mga non-government organizations na kasama tayo. So one is Literacy Philippines, and meron tayong Bangon Oragon Project, and this is again for our brothers and sisters in Bicol. And these are the numbers, no, kung meron tayong blessings na pwede i-share. These are the numbers na pwede natin uh, mabigyan ng ating donations if you're willing to donate. Also, we have Capipinas. This is also part naman of parang a partner of IMAD. So if you have been seeing the IMAD advocacy in my page or in my personal account, makikita natin sila. And this is also a non-governmental organization looking for help para mas matulungan natin ang ating uh, mga kababayan na nasalanta ng bagyo. So, welcome to Navigating the New Normal. This session is classroom assessment. Tignan natin yung audio natin. Chill lang po kayo dyan. Medyo mahaba-haba ang ating discussion sa gabing ito.
Sir Lito?
Yes po?
Sir Lito?
Yes, 21st century
Nag-echo daw
teacher.
po. Parang nasa loob
Nag-echo.
Opo, parang daw po nasa loob ng banga ang boses ni Teacher Lito.
Okay. Tignan natin. Ayusin natin, no? Tatry ko maging IT ngayong gabi. Let's just stop sharing muna.
Hintayin lang po natin. Medyo malakas po kasi ang ulan dun po sa lugar ni Director Lito. So, please wait for a while po. Medyo nagkaroon lang ng technical difficulty po sa kanya.
Okay. Okay na ba yung boses ko?
Sir, that's better. Opo, maganda na
Okay,
po.
better. Okay. Sige. So, ito na. Let's share screen. Share.
Sir Lito, may sinasabi si Teacher Ria Sereno. Salamat daw
Ano
po
sa
for
atin?
being a blessing to all Bicolanos.
Yeah, oo. So, taga Bicol din kasi si Ma'am, taga Kamsur yata siya. So, yun. So, sana mag-share tayo doon sa dalawang word na sinabi natin kasi you're also part of and my mother is a Bicolano. No, Bicolana. Meron kaming yung relatives namin meron sa Kamsur, meron sa Masbate, sa Baleno, and Sorsogon. So nandiyan nagkalat yung So thank you also for allowing us to promote those organizations para makatulong na din tayo. So siguro start na tayo. If okay na yung audio ko at saka yung camera natin, we can start now. Welcome to my session, Navigating the New Normal Classroom Assessment. We will highlight DepEd Order number 31, series of 2020, or the interim policy on classroom assessment or grading and assessment in the light of BELCP for this school year 2020-2021. However, I would like to remind po our participants, or yung mga nanonood ngayon kasi pwedeng hindi sila teacher, na ang session natin ngayon does not intend to replace po, ha? This does not intend to replace the rollout on assessment because we have concluded na nga the national rollout and we are expecting to have this echoed, po, and mag-add ng value yung ating regional and division offices based sa kung anong framework din yung na-develop nila in the light of the LCP. Kasi syempre may LCP din yung mga regions natin at saka SDOs natin and they might want to incorporate their unique context sa implementation natin ng assessment. And therefore, magkakaroon pa rin tayo ng rollout. And again, this session does not intend to replace that rollout. So I'm sharing with you these 3 circles muna, navigating the new normal in classroom assessment. So makita natin dyan, I have included the mandate, the quality management system, and the LCP. We have 3 circles. Nilagay ko ito kasi sinasabi nga natin, sa mandate natin, meron tayong interim policy, meron tayong organizational framework, meron tayong RAT plan, meron tayong TORs, kasi I would also like the teacher to make sense of everything. I-situate nila yung classroom assessment at saka implications nito sa kanilang TORs, sa kanilang PPST. Of course, may PPST sila. And if we have supervisors and school heads watching right now, we would also like them to situate classroom assessment sa linya ng work nila at sa standards nga sa competencies na expect sa kanila. So meron tayong PPSH at meron tayong PPSS for our principals and supervisors. In the same manner that we have SDOs and regions na merong quality management system in place, and some schools also have their quality management system in place. So whenever I do lecturing classroom assessment or instructional supervision, I will also go into the quality management system of the school or the office because I would also like to know the process flow, the tools, the recent opportunities, effectiveness, and customer satisfaction, and how the new interim policy on classroom assessment would have or could impact the quality management system. May mga nabago ba sa proseso nila? May mga nabago ba sa mga indicators ng offices natin? Because we have uh, parang a handful of changes, no, that might imply modifications in the blueprints sa quality management system. And of course, yung LCP. Nilagay natin yung LCP because there might be questions later, no, talking about how are we to distribute modules, check modules, ano pa ba yung mga concern, pag-collect ng feedback. So yung mga ganyang concerns which are not detailed in the interim policy. But again, we have the LCP or the learning continuity plan of your school that would bridge the gap, no, if whatever gaps meron doon sa ating policy at yung inaasahan nating practice. So nilagay natin siya dyan because context differs from one school to another. No? So baka may hinahanap tayo sa ibang school sa sistema ng kanilang pag-retrieve at pagkuha ng feedback na pwedeng hindi possible sa school natin because we have a different context. No? And talking about LCP, meron tayong sa risk, severity, and health protocols. So syempre may mga areas na based sa mga interviews din natin, kahit yung mga ka-chat natin, na talagang medyo mababa or low at talagang wala talagang risk doon sa area nila. So meron silang nagagawa na hindi pwedeng gawin ng mga nasa high risk community. So yun yung mga dapat nating intindihin that there might be gaps, no, makita natin, or may mga specific details sa policy na hinahanap natin na wala. We are acknowledging the complementary role of the learning continuity plans of your school. So pwedeng i-refer natin doon mamaya if we can qualify the questions that have to do with implementation later. So ayan. So makita natin itong mga circles na nag-overlap nito. We will be talking about process, policies, continuous improvement, instructional supervision, SDO context. Nilalagay natin to kasi gusto natin makita ng teacher, ma-realize ng teacher kung nasaan siya sa plano, kung nasaan siya sa policy. No? Kasi pag nirelease natin yung policy at tinignan natin yung policy, ay pinapaliwanag yan sa context ng administrator, nakikita yan sa context ng teacher, kailangan natin itong ipakita sa context, ay ipaliwanag sa context ng mga magulang, and of course, sa context ng mga mag-aaral. Kaya mahalaga na ma-situate natin nasaan tayo sa buong proseso at nasaan tayo, paano natin napipicture yung sarili natin sa buong policy. So what are the basic principles na makikita natin dun sa interim policy? And grading. Under the basic principles, of course, we're looking into why we have to assess, sino ba yung nag-a-assess, and what types of assessments are needed or forms of assessment na kailangan natin sa new normal. No? Then again, this is an interim policy, and being an interim policy in nature, this is just to be implemented this school year, and we can never tell based sa magiging dynamics sa implementation if there will be modifications again for the next school year. Pero ito ay syempre careful lang pag-aaral natin para kung ano man yung pwedeng gawin doon sa policy sa mga susunod na taon ay ma-incorporate natin. So basically kung nabasa na natin yung policy, more or less may mga mannote na tayo ng mga changes, significant changes doon sa policy. Again, i-highlight ko lang yung konting provisions kasi we're looking forward to the rollout, but I will be sharing very specific strategies na nakikita ko na maaaring hindi natin makita sa rollout, pero mapapakinabangan ng mga teachers. No? And I will also like to attempt to discuss this kung meron sa context ng, again, ng parent, kung meron tayong nanonood na parents sa YouTube, kung meron tayong mga students na nanonood sa ating live stream. Of course, we have grading. Meron na tayong bagong grading system. How do we assess? So how do we grade? Pag-uusapan natin later. Titingnan ko yung mga So failure is not final. It's formative. What is good about the policy is that kasi sa past policy and past implementations, nakikita natin that we put premium on summative assessments or the last part of assessments or assessments that are graded, no? At hindi nakikita masyado yung developmental nature ng assessment kung paano nagko-contribute ang bawat formative assessment para mas mas maintindihan natin, mas maging prepared tayo sa summative assessment. Kasi we have this thinking that we teach lessons, o yung mga nanay o yung mga anak, they have this thinking that they are actually studying to pass the test. And that is the misconception na kailangan natin basagin as teachers, because we are not teaching in order for our learners to pass a test or to pass the test. And we put also significant value on their journey, using the formative assessment. And there's beauty in failing in formative assessments or in formative or developmental process. There is beauty in failing because that gives us the opportunity to really reflect, kung bakit tayo bumagsak at kung ano yung kailangan nating i-inform, improve, or for teachers siguro inform your teaching. I am a parent and I don't really pressure my child to perform, but I set standards, kasi mahirap din na i-pressure mo yung anak mo na i-perfect siya lagi, i-perfect siya lagi. Nakikita ko pa rin yung value ng failing, may deeper sense ng reflection na mako-contribute siya para mas ma-improve niya yung sarili niya. And when you fail, we have to, or when our learners fail, we have to remind them, kung parent ka or teacher ka, we have to remind them that it's okay to fail. Anyway, it's not final, it's not the end, but it's part of the process. And we have to trust the process. For the basic principles, assessment, this is reflected in the interim policy. Assessment should be holistic and authentic in capturing the attainment of the most essential learning competencies, or the MELC. So alam natin, nag-emanate lahat sa MELC, yung pedagogies, yung instructional plan, and some other policies na lumabas ay naka-anchor doon sa nilabas nating most essential learning competencies ng DepEd. The second principle is assessment is integral for understanding student learning and development. Mamaya ipapaliwanag natin yan isa-isa. Kasi nga we put value on formative assessment, especially meron ng mga portfolio, for our learners to understand the journey and reflect, for their own improvement. Third, a variety of assessment strategies is necessary with formative assessments, taking priority to inform teaching and promote growth and mastery. We have to explain to our parents, as teachers, and probably kung hindi din tayo masyadong familiar sa dynamics ng teaching, ng assessment, sa teaching, hindi lahat ng assessment ay para sa grade. Yun yung kailangan natin paliwanag sa magulang, especially those na kinakariri yung pagsagot sa module, especially those na talaga yung gumagawa. So I think they have to understand that not all activities, or not all, if these activities are translated into formative assessments, that not all assessments are graded. And these are meant for the learners to have their own reflection. And this one, letter C, is for you teachers, to inform your teaching, paano ka nag-i-improve as a teacher. In relation to PPST, kailangan makita natin, hindi lang yung evaluative value or evaluative nature ni PPST, but the developmental nature ni PPST kung ilalagay natin sa context ng teacher. Again, may mga assessment na ginagawa natin as teachers kasi gusto nating i-improve ang ating sarili at gusto nating i-improve yung ating pagtuturo. Letter D, assessment and feedback should be a shared responsibility among teachers, learners, and their families. Sinasabi nga natin, dati pang engage yung parents. The local family code and the 1987 Constitution actually ini-engage na yung parent and their responsibility to educate their children. Medyo na-amplify lang these days kasi nga nasa bahay tayo, at naiba yung setup at medyo eto nga may pandemic, and therefore mas nare-require yung time ng parent, and therefore we have to clarify, no, kung ano talaga yung ini-expect na responsibilities and duties na i-perform ng ating parents this school year. Talking about assessment. And the last one is that assessment and grading share a positive impact on learning. So talking about assessment, sinabi natin kanina, para makapag-reflect ang bata, para makapag-improve ka ng sarili mong pagtuturo, no? Para magkaroon ka ng grade, but beyond grading is the positive impact on learning. Nagkakaroon tayo ng assessment, nagkakaroon ng mga pagtataya, nagkakaroon ng mga pagsubok, at ine-expect natin ng mga bata na pumasa sa mga pagsubok na ito dahil ang skill na natutunan nila sa mga pagsubok na ito are the same set of skills they would need sa pagharap sa totoong pagsubok ng buhay pag lumabas na sila ng school. And that is the reason why MELCs are enduring. No? And in the same manner that assessment should complement the way the competencies are planned to be enduring or selected to be enduring. So kailangan nag-complement yon kasi nga mahalaga na may positive impact ang learning at magagawa lang ito sa assessment and grading. So let's try to discuss the first principle. Assessment should be holistic and authentic in capturing the attainment of the most essential learning competencies. So nakikita natin that again, everything emanates from the most essential learning competencies. Pinili na from the curriculum guide, pinili natin ang mga enduring na competencies, ang mga competencies na pwedeng hindi lang basta-basta natututunan. Ito yung mga criteria na ginamit para mapili siya at yung mga competencies na pwede talagang i-apply sa totoong buhay. So these are the most essential learning competencies. And if you have been listening, sa mga press releases and interviews ng ating mga bosses, out of the 100 competencies, 100% of the competencies, we have 40% MELC for the most essential learning competencies. So, nawawala ngayon si 60%. Ang tanong, nasaan si 60% na learning competencies if we only have 40% of the most essential learning competencies? This is important, kasi in planning for assessment, we have to know what are our competencies, kung paano siya ita-translate. Yung paggawa nga ng module, tinitingnan natin kung paano natin i-articulate ang competencies into activities in the same manner that when we plan for assessment, we also look into how we can articulate and translate competencies into various assessment designs and tools. So, saan ngayon si 60% na competencies? Titingnan natin yung guidelines kung paano ang ginawa sa pagpili ng most essential learning competencies, meron sa 60% na subsumed na din doon sa 40%. Some integrated doon sa 40%. Some combined na doon sa 40% and some remained or retained. So, ibig sabihin, hindi technically na-eliminate yung 60%. Nandun lang din siya in essence. But merong mga prosesong pinagdadaanan. And why am I telling this to you, teachers? It's because it's important to change, basagin din natin ang misconception, no? Sa field na when there are less competencies, there is low quality of education. Pag konti yung competency, hindi ibig sabihin nito na mababa na yung quality of education. But again, in essence, nandun naman na talaga yung mga most essential competencies, acknowledging kung paano yung buong proseso na ginawa para ma-identify ang ating MELCs. So, digging deeper on the first basic principle, we have assessment should be holistic daw and authentic in capturing the attainment of MELCs. So, this is holistic kasi tinitingnan natin siya ng buo. Hindi natin siya tinitingnan ng independent, no, sa isa't isa. Yung mga forms of assessment, hindi natin siya tinitingnan ng independently sa isa't isa na walang kinalaman yung activity na ito sa formative na ito, sa darating na summative. Tinitingnan natin siya lahat
the learning activities, the learning outcome, the feedback and assessment has to have to be seen holistically. And this is parang a manifestation or translated no when milk no ay na-scaffold towards the achievement of content and performance standards. So, ibig sabihin, kung dati maraming competencies tapos nakuha natin yung milk, pag pinag-aralan natin yung milk, si milk naka-scaffold siya kung 8 lang yung natira o 7 lang o 9 lang yung natira, naka-scaffold pa rin siya towards the content and performance standards. So, if you can see, hindi na bago yung standards, but then na-select yung milk, which means to say that no matter how enduring these milks are, no matter how many milks ang natira doon, if you scaffold milks, they have to be able to deliver no, or cover or be articulated sa ating content and performance standards. So hindi siya mawawala, hindi siya maliligaw. So dapat ang tuhog ni milks ay papunta sa achievement ng ating content and performance standards. And of course, the formative assessment scaffolds towards summative assessment. Kaya nga siya holistic, ibig sabihin, pag nag-formative 1 ka, doesn't mean na when you plan for formative 2, independent itong formative assessments na to sa isa't isa. And that is the reason why you have to make sense of the milks. Kasi the formative assessment number 2 might use the prerequisite skill tested in your first formative assessment. And the second formative assessment result or skill no, na test natin might be a prerequisite to the third formative assessment. Because again, may scaffold sila. And that's how we see formative assessments. Hindi siya chunks ng independent tests no na binibigay natin for the sake lang na magkaroon tayo ng assessments. These formative assessments have to be carefully planned dahil papunta siya sa summative assessment. And in principle, there has to be a certain amount of preparation and readiness na dapat ihanda ng formative assessment bago kumuha ng summative assessment yung ating mga anak, yung ating mga estudyante. Ganun siya tinitingnan. So dapat walang ligaw dyan. If you are to discuss this in the context of your module, tinitingnan natin ang scaffold if milks are articulated in the activities and formative assessments are translated or articulated or communicated through the activities, then ibig sabihin, activities should have parang they should be developmentally sequenced. No? There should be scaffold na walang activity bigaw, na walang activity basta nandun lang at wala siyang purpose sa kabuuan ng module. So tinitingnan natin and we have to understand and we have to analyze these activities. Dahil pag may isang activity dyan na hindi supposed, for example, hindi natin nakikita, na supposedly wala siya doon, then yung scaffold mabibreak. Yung scaffold ng formative at scaffold ng milks mabibreak. But it doesn't necessarily mean na mali. Just so happen na pwede kasi nasa set ng mga bata natin, yung activity na to, pwedeng hindi siya ganun ka-relevant. But that doesn't necessarily mean na mali yung activity na yun. And that skill no, in qualifying whether an activity is a prerequisite skill or will lead or a key scaffold leading to summative assessment or leading to the realization of content and performance standard, that skill, that critical skill, dapat meron tayo mga teachers. Also, this is authentic in nature. We have to capture most essential learning competencies by making the activities, by making the assessment designs and tools more authentic o mas parang mas na-articulate using the zone of proximal development, which is the theoretical underpinning of our interim policy on assessment and practice. Kahit naman ng DepEd Order number 8, no, we are still using the zone of proximal development. And if we can see yung ating illustration, yung graphics natin on your screen, we have the child no, sa left part of the screen, And then meron dun space, the things you can do on your own. Tapos sa dulo ay yung merong shaded, heavily shaded na arrowhead. Sinasabi doon yung things you can't do yet, no matter how much support you get. At yung space sa gitna is the zone of proximal development. And therefore, ZPD is the space in between what the child knows and what the child doesn't know. But it banks on what the child already knows. Kaya kung tayo ay may mga pretest, since zone of proximal development is banking on what the child already knows, gumagawa tayo ng pretest so we can establish the schema. So we would know what the kids can do on their own and what schema or what stock knowledge meron na ang ating mga children. I'll give an example in exploring holistic and authentic assessment. Since there are a lot of parang opportunities to engage with teachers, so a lot of teachers nationwide, we were asking our teachers as to what kind of assessments ang usually nilalagay natin doon sa ating test. And we have essay, we have enumeration, we have matching type, we have identification, then we have multiple choice. Back when I was chief of the curriculum then, tinitingnan din natin yung exam. Kasi usually, pag tiningnan, pag inanalyze natin yung situation na bakit may batang hindi nagpe-perform, bakit may mga schools na hindi nagpe-perform, maraming factors yung nagko-contribute sa performance, lalo na dun sa learning outcomes. And those factors we have to understand. So meron tayong mga schools na hindi masyadong nagpe-perform, so tinignan natin, nag-validate tayo, bakit hindi sila nagpe-perform. Talking about assessment, bakit hindi sila nagpe-perform. So nag-observe tayo ng classes, okay naman yung teacher, nagre-respond naman yung mga bata, the formative assessments are responsive then, okay din yung mga results. So, okay naman yung facilities, okay naman yung learning environment, pero bakit pagdating ng test, this is a division-wide test, bakit hindi nagpe-perform? So, isa sa mga natirang factors na tinignan natin is the test itself. The test itself, paano siya kinonstruct, at ito nga yung mga test types na nakikita natin. Taking for example, multiple choice. Based sa experience natin sa pagpunta doon sa community, kasi this is a very remote community, merong mga doon, din lalakarin mo yung bundok, yung mga ilog ka na natatawarin just to reach the community. And the community is very simple. Talagang kakain siya ng kamote sa umaga, kakain ng kamote sa tanghali, at kakain ng kamote sa gabi. So ibig sabihin, ito na talaga yung order ng buhay nila doon. And syempre, if you do immersion, you do what they do. So kakain ka din ng kamote sa morning, kakain ka ng kamote sa tanghali, then dinner mo, kamote din. Because they don't have a choice. Sabihin, wala silang sunny side up sa umaga, wala silang choice to have sinigang, for example, sa tanghali, or choice na mag-adobo sa gabi. Because these are the available resources. At ang aspeto na to na wala kang pagpipilian, sa isang aspeto ng buhay mo ay nadadala pa sa iba pang aspeto ng pamumuhay. And taking that particular example or context sa pag-aaral nila at pagkuha nila ng test. Kasi pag nag-multiple choice type ka na test, for example, hindi lang siya nakikita mo yung letter D ang sagot sa A, B, C, and D. There is a skill involved. You have to discriminate muna all the wrong choices at isipin mo bakit naging wrong choice yun bago mo nasabi na letter D. Kahit yung anak ko, ganun yung ginagawa niya, ganun yung skill na din i-develop namin. So, magpi-50-50 ka muna. Ano kaya yung dalawang options na hindi tamang sagot at ano yung more or less dalawang options na tamang sagot. So, it's a skill to be developed. At kung hindi ito, kung ako ang mga students natin hindi exposed sa ganitong context at sa ganitong schema o sa ganitong skills, they might have difficulties translating or applying this skill sa iba pang aspeto ng buhay nila. And in that case nga is answering the multiple choice type of test. And that's how important the zone of proximal development is. Kasi we have to know ano ang sistema, ano ang context sa learning community so that we can apply in designing our assessment tools or instruments. No? Kasi kailangan natin. At mas teacher lang nakakaalam kung ano yung mga konteksto na ito. And that is the reason why naging school-based na lahat ng test. Because it's the school and it's the teacher who know kung ano ang context at kung ano ang experience ng bata doon sa school community. No? If you are a supervisor, if you are an administrator, and if you haven't been in, for example, in that community, how are you to decide on what type of assessment is parang appropriate for them? And that's how important teachers are, and they are the ones constructing their own assessments, designing their own assessments, because they know exactly what the contexts are. And that's exactly why the theoretical underpinning of assessment is zone of proximal development. Looking at all the test types, tinitingnan nga natin, wala namang rule na nagsasabing part 1 mo, multiple choice, part 2 mo, identification, part 3 mo, matching type, enumeration yung part 4 mo, or essay yung part 5 mo, no? Pero usually ganito yung order, no? Medyo naging generative kasi yung pagtingin natin sa assessment, sa testing. I'm talking about classroom assessment, no? Iba pa kasi national level testing. Now, kung ganito yung schema natin, ang sinasabi lang naman ng mga assessment principles is that when you plan for your assessment, so syempre from easy to difficult, no, yung mga ni Piaget, cognitive processes ni Piaget, no, yung cognitive development ng mga theories and principles ni Piaget. So easy to difficult, di ba? Simple to complex, ganun lang. Pero hindi nga sinasabi multiple choice kaagad yung Kasi we wouldn't know if using the context of the children, of the learners, baka hindi natin alam, mas madali pa yung essay pala para sa kanila. Then, have you tried placing essay sa first part of your test? If you are to consider the zone of proximal development, na-try niyo na ba? So, yun yung mga challenging questions na gusto natin i-pose sa teacher. When you are designing your assessment tools and designing your assessment instruments based on the zone of proximal development. I'll give you an example. In a test, no, nagdala ng 6 na isdang buhay si Alden sa mansyon. Nais na itong ilagay sa 2 aquarium. Ilan ang isda na ilalagay? Looking at the competency, this is a simple division. 6 na isda at ilalagay sa 2 aquarium. So basically, 6 divided by 2. That's the skill. However, since naisulat ang tanong natin in a particular context, na nandyan si Alden, nandyan si Maine, nandyan si Lola ni Dora, napagtingin natin siya, at dinala natin yung test item na ito doon sa bundok na walang kuryente, walang appliance. They do not know who Alden is. They do not know who Maine is. They do not know who Yaya ni Dora is. So context pa lang of the test, lugi na sila. That's how important zone of proximal development is. Context sa content na ituturo, context sa situation na i-involve doon sa ating test, context, yung zone of proximal development, context sa test types, even time, no? Even time. I think time is also a context that we have to reconsider. Baka yung mga bata dito sa atin masyado nang mainipin and they couldn't stand, for example, a 15-minute 15-minute test. Pero doon sa ibang lugar, kayang-kaya nila yon. Because na-expose yung mga bata natin sa isang community sa maraming distraction, and therefore 15 to 20 20 minutes lang kaya nilang ilagay sa isang specific assessment, no? And kasi nawawala na yung focus nila. That is also a context that we have to think about. Time is the context. The manner of designing the test, naka-base doon sa context, yung situation na nilalagay sa test, these are all contexts. And this context should be anchored on the zone of proximal development. That's how important ZPD is in planning for assessment. I'll give you an example, another example. This is an activity which is also intended as a formative assessment at the same time. Sabi dito, pagmasdan ng mga taong nasa larawan sa ibaba, si Haji Amin Api, Lea Salonga, Socorro Ramos, Joseph Billo, Kenneth Cobontre, Manny Pacquiao, Tony Tan, and Jose Rizal. Sabi dyan, minsan din silang naging batang katulad mo. Sa kanilang pagsisikap, natupad nila ang kanilang pangarap. Ang pangarap ay ang mga bagay na nais mong magawa, makamit o matupad sa iyong buhay. Ano nga ba ang iyong pangarap? I'll ask you, kilala mo ba si Haji Amin Api? Kilala mo ba si Socorro Ramos? Kilala mo ba si Kenneth Cobonque? Kilala mo ba si Tony Tan? So kung di natin kilala to as an adult, kilala kaya sila ng grade 1 gagamit nito. We are not saying that the activity or the tool, no, the activity or the assessment, if this is to be considered as formative assessment, hindi natin kasi sinasabing mali. Probably, hindi lang appropriate yung picture, no? Kasi hindi lahat ng ng batang nasa ganong age ay kilala yung mga tao na to. Pero hindi sila mali. And therefore, we have again, I have to refer you back again to the zone of proximal development na pwede kasing kilala natin to as teachers, mga taong to, if they are to be used, no? Or to be included doon sa ating assessment. Pwedeng kilala natin to, teachers. Pero yung mga estudyante natin, pwedeng hindi sila kilala. And therefore, the context pa lang, dugi na sila. That's how important the zone of proximal development is in planning and designing your assessment. So sana, may natututunan tayong konti-unti. Principle 1 pa lang naman tayo. Talking about teaching and learning process, we have modes of delivery, we have teaching learning experience, we have the most essential learning competencies and classroom assessment. Yung modes of delivery, so again, we have the face-to-face na hindi pa natin ginagawa, we have the blended learning, and we have the distance learning and homeschooling, no, na wala pa sa public school. At yung each mode of delivery ay merong mga appropriate resources na pwedeng gamitin sa kanila, no? Nakalagay ito sa ating suggested resources doon sa ating CI DM's OUCI Memorandum 162 series of 2020 o yung suggested strategies in the implementation of distance learning sa time ng pandemic. May isang table doon na nakalagay doon kung ano yung modality at ano yung more or less appropriate resources na gamitin para sa modality na ito. Makita natin na yung teaching experience, yung most essential learning competencies sa yung classroom assessment, may isang tuhog. At yung tuhog na ito ay ginagamit natin yung cognitive process dimension sa ibaba. Remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. How are this important? We have ang pag-alam, no? This is called cognitive process dimension. Yung iba tinatawag siya na na higher order thinking skills, no? Kasi yung dati yung reference natin, no? But meron siya kasing sariling characteristic, that is why CPD na siya nang lumabas siya ng Debit Order number 8, no? Because the nature is yes hierarchical pero recurring yung nature ni cognitive process dimension. Binibigyan niya ng lalim ang teaching and learning experience. So pag tinignan mo yung activities, habang tumatagal yung activity sa module or sa online resource, lumalalim ang mga activities. Pwedeng humihirap yung mga activities. Kasi nga, na-infuse si cognitive process dimension. In the same manner na si classroom assessment, ini-infuse din natin si cognitive process dimensions para mas mapalalim yung mga tanong at mas kailangan natin ito ngayong school year, no? Hindi lang tayo nag-focus sa mga remembering questions. We also have evaluating, creating, or analyzing questions for our classroom assessment. And why is that? kapag nag-module tayo at nagkaroon tayo ng assessment, nakalagay doon sa nakalagay sa ating sa DepEd order na there is already an assumption that when learners are answering the assessment, bukas ang resources. Pwedeng bukas si Google, pwedeng bukas si module, pwedeng bukas ang textbook, pwedeng bukas ang lahat ng possible resources. No? And I don't really see that as an opportunity for them to cheat. I see them as an opportunity for us to upgrade features, upgrade our questions. Na kung may possibility na open resources, so bakit ka pa mag-resort doon sa remembering questions? Bakit ka pa mag-resort sa low-level questions? Then you might want to ask, I'm not saying difficult question, I'm saying challenging question. I think that's the right term. Challenging questions para mas magkaroon ng critical thinking. Partida na kahit katabi niya si mommy niya o kahit katabi niya yung daddy niya na hindi dapat nang sasagot. Pero kung magkatabi sila while having the assessment but your questions are higher order thinking skills o mas mataas na level sa cognitive process dimensions, pwede pa nga silang magkaroon ng konting FGD if that's possible, or brainstorming if that's possible. In that way, again, we have to again, hili ko dun sa ganung thinking na may mga misconceptions tayong babasagin. Imbis na i-highlight natin that this is an opportunity for cheating, let's baliktarin natin, inverse natin yung thinking. This is actually an opportunity for us na mas mapalalim pa yung pagtatanong natin at mas ma-promote pa ang critical thinking amongst the learners. So that's the reason why the cognitive process dimensions ang tumatahi at tumatagni sa mga learning experience at classroom assessment using the most essential learning competencies. Yun. Titingnan ko pa din yung yung ating mga comments. Baka kasi may tanong na I can address agad, So medyo bati pa lang sila. Letter B, principle. So kanina yung first principle natin, holistic, and holistic siya dapat at siya ay authentic, para ma-capture ang MELCs. The second principle is that assessment is integral for understanding student learning and development. So again, we have to understand that not all assessments, the purpose ng assessment is to grade. There are also assessments that are made to understand student learning at kung paano sila nagpo-progress o yung kanilang development. And these are formative assessment or assessment as learning. Assessment as learning is a type of assessment that enables the learner to reflect sa kanilang sariling improvement. So for example, kinuha niya yung module, sinagutan niya yung module, tapos nag-refer siya doon sa sagot sa likod para ma-perfect yung there has to be a certain amount of reflection. Yun yung kaya I don't really have an issue kung meron mang sagot sa likod, yung ating mga modules. Kasi iyon ang purpose niya for assessment as learning. Na pag nagsagot yung bata, say for example, activity number 1, sinagutan niya 5 questions, tapos titingnan niya yung sagot sa likod, tapos pag nakita niya 3 out of 5 lang siya, that gives him or her the opportunity to reflect bakit 3 out of 5 lang. That's the purpose of formative assessment or assessment as learning, to enable your learners to reflect doon sa naging result ng kanyang assessment, formative assessment sa araw na yun. At yun din yung reason kung bakit may sagot yung module sa likod, para ma-promote yung independent learning amongst our learners. Pwede ba siyang checkan ng parent? Pwede naman siyang checkan ng parent, kasi may mga instances, baka kasi tanongin nyo, yung mga instances talaga na based sa feedback, yung pagbigay natin yung module, tapos Hintay natin masagutan lahat, no? Tapos tsaka natin checkan. So parang ang burden ng teacher sa pag-check ng modules, ang dami-daming klase, ang dami-daming pages, ang dami-daming sections. Tapos ilang bata, so check mo lahat ng module. So I'm wondering why you have to wait for, kung ano, no, kung wala ka dun sa very remote area. So I'm wondering why you have to wait for everything to be finished muna, then you collect the module. Well, when in fact, the learners can actually check it by themselves kasi intended for independent learning a module. And the parents can also help check the modules, no? And our role as a teacher is kung meron tayong mechanism to just ask, ang nakikita ko kasi na ano is for assessment as learning, no? Assessment as learning or self-reflection. Papasok si teacher para i-text yung bata, for example, anong score mo sa activity 1, anong score mo sa activity 2, anong score mo sa activity 3. Ma'am, ganito, ma'am, ganyan. Pasado po ako sa 1, activity 2, hindi po ako pumasa. Activity 3, hindi po ako pumasa. Activity 4, pumasa po ako. 5, hindi po ako pumasa. So, ang tanong dyan is, i-gradean mo ba? If this is formative assessment, of course not. Kasi it's not intended for grading. So, ano yung dapat na proseso ni teacher na ginagawa? O hindi ka pumasa sa activity 2, activity 3, and 5. Saan ka nahirapan? Bakit ka nahirapan? So these are metacognitive questions kasi nga ang purpose lang ng formative assessment ay para makapag-realize yung bata. Nahirapan po ako kasi ganito. So parang doon pala ako mag-ano. Say for example, if you're very particular with spelling, tama naman po yung sagot ko sa 3, tama naman po yung sagot ko sa 4, kaya lang medyo kulang ako sa letter sa spelling. So that would somehow enable the learner to reflect na tama yung pagbuo niya ng concept, tama yung pagsagot niya ng concept, medyo may konting dapat pa siyang gamitin, i-enhance no, sa kanyang spelling drill, and that is a valuable reflection on his part. At nade-deprive ang bata ng opportunity to reflect, no? At ma-identify niya ang kanyang opportunities for improvement kung parent ang nagsasagot ng kanyang module. At kung parent ang kausap ko ngayon, I'm also a parent, mga mommy, daddy, we are denying our children of the opportunity to self-reflect if we are the ones answering their modules, because the intention of the formative assessment is for them to reflect saan siya nagkakamali at paano niya itatama next time. And there's, again, babalik ko kayo sa quotation kanina, there is beauty in failing because you realize something from your failure. Anyway, failure is not final, it's formative. It's part of developmental process and you learn in the process. Therefore, you have to trust the process. That is assessment as learning. Letter C principle is a variety of assessment strategies is necessary for formative assessment, taking priority to inform teaching and promote growth and mastery. And this is also formative assessment or assessment for learning, which is usually used naman by our teachers. Kasi the teachers are using the results of the formative assessment to inform their teaching. Nag-i-improve ba ang pedagogical approaches na ginagamit ko using the results of the formative assessment? So yun yung mga tanong for teachers. For example, if activities 1 to 5 are treated as formative assessment, ano ang score ng bata? Magre-reflect siya doon. Ngayon, at the same manner, na kung ito yung score ng bata, dapat nagre-reflect din si teacher, bakit ganito yung score ng bata? Meron bang pedagogical implication yung hanay, na pagkakahanay ng activities? Meron bang pedagogical implication para sa akin as teacher to provide activities, to provide extra activities? So if you are preparing activities to supplement, there has to be a basis. And that basis is the result of your formative assessment. Kasi the first question is, if you are to create your own activities na meron naman tayong module, what for? That's the first question. On what basis? Which means to say that if you contextualize an activity, your decision to contextualize the activity is based on a result of a certain formative assessment na based sa activities 1 to 5, nahirapan yung aking estudyante, ano yung reflection ko to inform my teaching as assessment for learning is that I can actually do supplemental activities on the basis of results nga ng summative or assessment for learning. But I don't do activities for no reason at all. Dagdag trabaho sa atin, dagdag trabaho sa bata. So if the result of the formative assessment is just telling us to do about 1 or 2 activities supplemental enough to bridge the gap sa scaffolding ng activities 1 to 5, then go, just produce 2. So you don't have to produce another 10 just to bridge the gap of the 5 activities. So it doesn't work that way. Kaya when you do activities, what for? And on what basis? Ganun lagi yung tanong. If supplemental activities are to be produced on the basis of, or contextualization is to be produced, or contextualized activities are to be produced on the basis of your assessment for learning results. So ganun siya lagi. Sana may, again, lagi ako nagta-temperature check. Sorry, ganun talaga ako. Kahit sa face-to-face nagta-training, I would like to know if the audience are learning. So, kailangan ko ng konting magtanong kayo doon sa YouTube natin na live, or magsabi kayo na nag-agree kayo o may natututunan kayo for me to be able to check yung learning. Kasi that's formative assessment also. If I ask you kung meron kayong natututunan na nasa letter C, basic principle pa lang tayo, if I'm asking you every time, that's also a form of formative assessment so that I can also adjust sa presentation natin. So for the kinds of assessment or forms of assessment, meron tayong assessment for learning. So ibabalik natin kanina that the technical use for assessment for learning is for us teachers to have instructional decision for both diagnostic and developmental. Mamaya ipapaliwanag ko. So assessment for learning. And since for instructional decision lang siya ng teacher, this is not graded. So ibig sabihin, kung diagnostic ang purpose ng assessment mo and developmental yung purpose ng assessment mo, this is not graded for the sole reason that unfair para sa mga bata, nagradean mo yung test na ituturo mo pa lang. Kasi na-diagnostic pa lang. Eh paano kung nagkataon na wala siyang zone of proximal development or prior knowledge or schema sa topic na i-discuss mo pa lang. So that would be unfair for the learners to have their assessments graded. Kung ilalagay natin sa context ng module, if you have pre-assessments, you're not supposed to grade assessments. Pre-test. You're not supposed to grade pre-test because this is assessment for learning that should give you enough opportunity to decide what to do next. That's the purpose of that assessment for learning, and therefore that is not graded. If you have assessment as learning, which measures your own progress in developmental in approach, or developmental yung approach natin, this measures the own progress of the learner, development. As sinabi ko kanina, assessment as learning, if you have formative assessments, and then assessment as learning yung nature niya, that should provide the learners the opportunity to reflect. Saan ako bumaba? Saan yung strength ko? Ano yung pwede kong gawin para maging strength ko yung weakness na to? And again, this is not graded. Because this is just developmental. Ibig sabihin, pwedeng hindi pa masyadong napipino at hindi pa masyadong nasusolid yung concept development niya. So kung ikaw hindi pa masyadong solido yung yung understanding mo sa isang concept, it's also unfair na nag-gradean ka doon sa assessment na yon. So let let them reflect based sa result ng mga formative assessment na assessment as learning, because this is the intended purpose of such assessment. And of course, yung dulo na, that is assessment of learning, or ito na talaga yung klase ng mga assessment na kumukuha ng totoong natutunan ng bata. And this is graded. So, tinitingnan natin si pre-test as diagnostic assessment again. So, kunyari, 5 items. So, ilan yung pre-test? Ilan yung, di ba nagte-test item analysis tayo? Kahit sa diagnostic assessment dati, ilan ang hindi pumasa sa 1, ilan ang hindi pumasa sa 2, because that will tell us, item analysis, that would tell us kung aling item ang pinakamahirap. And that would tell us gaano kahirap yung pagka-construct ng question, or ano yung competency na nahihirapan ng bata doon sa pre-test. Kasi ang diagnostic assessment, kung napapractice natin before, what happens next after a diagnostic assessment is for you to plan ano yung next steps natin. Based sa mga questions and based sa results ng mga questions na to, ano yung mga competency na ina-articulate ng mga question na to na mahirap para sa bata. And then, next steps will be, titingnan natin yung adjustment kung saan saan competency tayo mas magpo-focus at aling competency ang pwedeng konti na lang yung time o pwedeng e-passing na lang siguro. Based yon sa kung paano natin ginagawa, next steps natin using the pre-test. And this is assessment for learning kasi tayo, teachers, ang gagamit ng result ng pre-test to decide on what to do next. Kailangan bang magkaroon ng supplemental activities? Gagawa pa ba ng activities based sa result ng pre-test? So, yung ganun yung mga decision na gagawin natin. Alam niyo, pag nagte-training tayong teachers, I don't know if you can relate, meron tayong session 0 eh. Session 0 is leveling of expectations, Pero maganda sa L&D, setting expectations na siya, hindi na siya leveling expectations. Kasi how do you exactly level an expectation? If you say you level the expectation based sa result ng session 1, based sa feedback sa session 0, dapat may changes na, may calibrations ng gagawin sa session 1, 2, 3, and 4. But, despite the result of the, para mai-situate lang yung context ni diagnostic. Pero kung sa leveling expectation 0, session 0, based sa naging result nun, ay walang naging modifications kung paano itatakbo ang session 1, 2, kasi nakaplano na siya sa matrix na hindi siya pwedeng gawin, then there is no leveling na nangyari. And then the purpose of session 0, na defeat yung purpose, na to actually determine to level the expectation so that you can create necessary adjustments sa mga susunod na sessions. In the same manner na ganito siya, na when you do diagnostics, the result of diagnostics as an assessment for learning has to be used by the teacher for the next steps to be taken. So, ganun siya. Versus the mastery index naman. So, mastery index naman is again assessment for learning. So, kung familiar tayo sa index of mastery, so for a class of 45, for example, 38 ang naka-5, 5 ay naka-4, 2 ang naka-3, 0 naka-2, 0 naka-1. So, tatanong natin, ilang bata ang naka-5, 38. So, walang naka-1. And the mastery index or index of mastery as a result of formative assessment is telling the teacher, may instructional decision tayo sa dulo ng index of mastery. Ano siya? Mag-reteach ba tayo? O mag-proceed na tayo sa next lesson? Ganun yung decision ni index of mastery as formative assessment for learning. Because ang gamit niya ay for the teachers. the index of mastery is not a reflection of your learners' true achievement. Dahil nga sa siya ay assessment for learning, ang purpose ni index of mastery is to inform the teacher. No? Ito ay reflection on how effective the strategy was or used, no, was on that day. Hindi siya reflection kung gaano kagaling ang bata. Reflection ito kung gaano ka-appropriate yung pedagogical approach na ginamit mo nung araw na yon. Dahil yung dalawang bata na naka-3 it doesn't necessarily mean na mahina sila. It might mean that the teaching strategy on that day ay hindi effective for these two kids. So, ang usual natin na decision is to have remediation for the two and then proceed to the next lesson because majority got 4 and 5, no? Ang toll naman nito, pag tayo ay nag-remediate, yung dalawa na i-remedial natin, tapos using the same pedagogical approach pa, walang nangyari. Hindi nga siya sukatan ng true achievement, but sukatan ng effectiveness ng pedagogy on that day. Tapos, nung nag-remediate ka, walang pagbabago sa pedagogy. So, anong mangyayari? Are we expecting na matuto yung bata using the same pedagogy? Doon na nga siya medyo bumaba as reflected by the mastery index. Which means to say, mga teachers, na in a true sense, in a true use of index of mastery, you might decide that this result might inform you to proceed to the next lesson. But if the observer is keen, for example, ako mag-observe ng klase mo, and if I am that keen, I might ask you also to reteach using another strategy. Because index of mastery is a reflection of how effective the strategy nung araw na yon. And pwede din kasi na makita natin na the strategy was too easy. No, masyadong madali, na walang masyadong challenge. And therefore, as an observer, I might actually ask you to try to use another strategy and compare what happens to the index of mastery. If we are to make use of the principles na intended for mastery index. But if you so decide to just proceed because of this result, then okay lang siya, walang problema. Kasi yun naman talaga yung supposedly decision. But if you want to, kasi nga, this result should inform your teaching. If you think that teaching the lesson using another strategy would make you a better teacher, kung matcha-challenge ka para maging better teacher, then okay lang din naman siya. So either way, pwede siya. What we are trying to emphasize is that the mastery index as assessment for learning has a very technical and special purpose for you to decide on what to do next, whether to reteach or proceed to the next lesson. Pero hindi siya reflection kung gaano kagaling ang bata. It's a reflection of how appropriate your strategy, the strategy used was on that day. And of course, versus post-test, so ano na ba? Usually kasi kino-compare lang natin sa context ng research, pre-test and post-test. But in pre-test, ang tinitingnan natin on how we can possibly adjust the next steps. So ano naman yung gamit ni post-test? Ang post-test ba ay necessary in the context of module? Si post-test ba ay necessary na siya yung summative assessment? I-evaluate natin. Kasi based, mamaya makikita natin, ipapaliwanag natin sa context ng module. Ang dynamics nitong mga numbers nito. So I hope, meron pa tayong nakukuha doon sa sinasabi natin. Now, if you are to ask, kasama ba sa issue 1 yung standard test item range? No, wala siya doon. Pero meron tayong OUCI memo dated May 9, series of 2020 for AT and LDR standards. At sabi doon, for modular approach, for key stage 1, we have 5 items, key stage 2, 10 items, Key Stage 3, 15 items, and Key Stage 4, 15 items. These are the standard test item range based on ADM-LDR. Meron tayong OUCI memo naman dyan. However, we also have an OUCI memo on academic ease, no? Para medyo mabawasan yung yung stress and anxiety ng ating mga learners, at sinasuggest doon na if this might be the standard, but based on the teacher's professional judgment, you might actually reduce the 10 items for key stage 2 into 5. No? Pwedeng general o pwedeng depende sa case ng bata. So, meron na tayong OUCI memo, and that is OUCI Memo 37 Series of 2020, yung academic piece, para hindi masyadong burdensome sa part ng teacher magplano din ng assessment at burdensome para sa mga estudyante natin na mag-take ng assessment. You have you can decide as to how many items ang pwede nating ibigay. Depende kung ito yung nire-require ng situation natin. In context, sa kusina ni Juana, magluluto si Juana yung asawa ko. Magluluto na si Juana. When the cook tastes the soup, that's formative assessment. And when customers taste the soup, that's the summative assessment. So yung summative assessment, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, kung ito man ay yung mga active gawain sa pagkatuto 1, gawain sa pagkatuto 2, 3, 4, 5 doon sa module, kung siya din yung assessment, formative assessment ninyo, ginagawa lang natin yung mga formative assessment na yon, no? Like cooking and tasting the soup, no? Na pag nagluluto tayo ng sinigang, sa unang tikim, kulang ng alat, dagdag ng asin. Sa pangalawang tikim, kung naglalagay kayo ng luya, no? May mga naglalagay ng luya. If you feel like gusto mo ng luya, dagdagan mo ng luya. Sa pangatlong tikim, medyo nakulangan ka sa lapot, so dagdagan mo ng gabi. Sa pang-apat na tikim, parang kulang ngayon sa asim, so dadagdagan mo siya ng asim. So, nagbibigay tayo ng formative assessments. If the activities are considered sa module are considered as formative assessment, ang purpose lang niya is to improve the taste towards the summative assessment and not the summative assessment itself, no? So there is an assumption that not all the activities in the module, the context of module, are graded. Yes, they are recorded para makapag-assessment 4 ka, ibig sabihin makapag-decide ka on what to do next. At para sa mga bata, para makapag-assessment as or makapag-reflect, but definitely not assessment of, because these are not intended for grading, no? Dahil lalo na dun sa mga first parts pa lang, for example, ng module niya, medyo nasa concept development pa lang, parang hindi fair na mag-summative assessment ka agad at gradean mo kaagad yung activity na hindi pa masyadong fair, na firm up yung concept na tinuturo natin. So every time you taste the soup, you want to improve the taste. Every time you provide formative assessment, you want to improve your teaching and you want your learners to improve their weaknesses. Ganun lang yung logic niya. But at the end of the day, ang patuloy na pagtikim sa soup at patuloy na pag-experience sa formative assessment will prepare the learners to pass the summative assessment and will prepare you to become a better teacher because you are planning for assessment. So, ganun lang yung logic niya. Lagay natin sa TV ni Ate and Kuya. The show, this is my favorite context sa judging format ni Showtime. Parang hindi, wala nang nagko-comment sa ating Facebook, ay sa ating YouTube. Comment po kayo o tanong kayo. We have TV ni Ate at ni Kuya sa judging format ng Showtime. Dali lang po Yun naman po yung trabaho natin. So, marami tayong commitment. Sa context ni Showtime, yung bata, sila yung contestants. Magpe-perform na sila. So pag nagpe-perform yung bata or yung contestant, pagkatapos nilang mag-perform, ang susunod na gagawin ng mga host ay itatanong ang score ng madlang people. Hindi sila direkta sa judge. Kailangan madlang people muna kaagad. No? Bakit? Because this is formative assessment in nature. No? Yung feedback ng madlang people will tell kunin natin yung assessment 4 yung 4, yung gamit niya for teachers for instructional decision. Yung 8, 9, and 10 na scores na to sa performance ng mga bata will tell Showtime, no? Kung more or less maganda ba yung segment, appreciated ba yung segment, okay ba yung segment or not. In the same manner that those scores will tell us, no, if okay ba yung strategy, if okay ba yung plinano nating form or type or design ng assessment. No? That will tell us. Kasi assessment for learning. Assessment as learning for our learners' reflection is that the score 8, 9, and 10 will give the performers the idea kung medyo okay ang kanilang performance or not. May chance ba silang manalo o wala? No, that will tell them. Kasi ito ay assessment. As learning, sa manner naman ng mga bata, 8, 9, and 10 will tell them kung more or less papasa siya o hindi. That's how formative assessment 4 and assessment as works, no, in this scenario. Kasi kung mabababa yung score niyan, that should tell at continuous na ganun kabababa, that will inform assessment 4 sa Showtime na baka hindi na okay yung segment na yun. Baka pwedeng alisin na siya o palitan siya ng iba o i-modify niya. Lagyan niya ng twist, no? Yung segment na yun, no? Parang katulad nung sa tawag ng tanghalan. Sorry nga, mga sample natin kasi pinapanood natin. Nung medyo nananawa na yung tao na kailangan 8 kang panalo, medyo binawasan na nila, no? Pati yung yung kalimutan ko yung yung maraming corona, dapat kasi 10 corona ba yun? Yung Q&A, no? 10 corona ba yun? Eh sa tagal, no, nagkakaroon na ng feedback siguro na medyo nananawa na yung tao, kailangan na lang lagyan ng twist na parang 3 na lang o 4 na corona na lang, pasok ka na sa next round. So that's how formative assessment 4 works sa part ng Showtime. At ganun din sa atin, that if the activities are not working anymore, then that's the right time for us to contextualize. If the results are telling us na medyo hindi kakayanin ng bata na i-accomplish ang mga task for 2-3 days, then we might want to give flexibility, sabihin natin na 4 days or 5 days, no, for instructional decision kasi sa atin. And again, dun sa mga bata, more or less maganda yung performance nila or more or less ay hindi ba sila papasa based sa mga formative assessments. At kung manalo man sila, ano yung gagawing improvement nila sa susunod na performance, no? Baka okay sa judges, pero walang entertainment value. So ganun yung realization na pwedeng gawin ng contestants o nung bata. But at the end of the day, the grade, no, na magpapasa sa bata at magpapapanalo sa contestant is assessment of learning, which is summative assessment. In the context of your module, makita natin yung module ng DepEd, no? Ito yung mukha niya, and then ito yung mga elements niya, sa standard, May pre-test, discussion, activity, assessment 1. If you're using a different activity, you are using a different module na hindi ganito yung interface, then it means to say na most probably you have to supply the pre-test. So ganun, kung wala siyang given. Which is okay lang naman kasi talagang planning for assessment is real part of our job no, as teachers. And planning for the succeeding assessments or activities. The same din sa grades 1 to 3 kasi ito nga yung standard format natin. For us to be able to know which part of the module to be graded, which part of the module are not supposed to be graded, and which activities are supposed to be translated into assessment as or assessment for learning, we have to know the dynamics of the module as teachers. Buksan natin yung module. Iba-iba yung tawag dyan, probably, if you're using the different references, pero may description. What I need to know. This will give you an idea of the skills or competencies you are expected to learn in this module. What I know. This part includes an activity that aims to check what you already know about the lesson to take. So kung may mga activities dito sa what I know, chine-check lang niya ang prior knowledge. Chine-check lang niya ang schema na meron ng bata. So ang tanong, gigradean mo ba? Of course not, because this is assessment for learning, for your teacher's instructional decision on what to do next. And this is formative assessment, and it's not graded. What's in? This is a brief drill or review to help you link the current lessons with the previous one. So para review, if this is translated or articulated as a form of activity, yung what's in natin, again, this is not graded. Therefore, this is formative assessment lang din. No? Kasi tinitingnan natin if the child can actually connect past lesson sa current lesson. What's new? In this portion, the new lesson will be introduced to you in various ways as a story, a song, a poem, a problem opener, activity, or situation, etc., etc. No? So, introduction pa lang din. So, if there are activities, if these are articulated into activities, then introductory activities pa lang din to. Are they supposed to be graded? No, because they're just introducing the lessons. This section provides a brief discussion of the lesson. This aims you to help discover and understand new concepts and skills. Concept development. May activities ba? Are these translated into assessments? Yes, these are translated, probably formative. Do we need to grade all the scores in what is it? No. Hindi. No? Because this is just the phase where they are beginning to understand and firm up their understanding of the concept. What's more, this comprises activities for independent practice to strengthen your understanding and skills of the topic. You may check the answers in the exercises using the answer key at the end of the module. So ito na nga yun. For independent learning, parang enrichment, no? But since this is enrichment, this should give the teacher the idea as to whether provide additional, no, or not na, or enough na si module, si activity sa module, makakapag-decide ka. And since yun yung purpose niya, therefore, this again is under formative assessment. Now, what I have learned includes questions or open-ended statements to be filled the process what you learn from the lesson. So after parang nag-generalize ka na, remember that when you generalize, medyo hindi ka pa nag-a-apply, wala ka pang solid basis, no, na whether the child really learned or not, and therefore this again, if these are articulated into activities, these are not graded. This might be recorded again for assessment for learning. Kung may tanong po, doon pa rin tayo sa Letter D, assessment and feedback should be a shared responsibility among teachers, learners, and their families. binago nga yung responsibilities and duties ng parents, no, sa pag-engage niya doon sa assessment ng kanilang mga anak. Ano yung mga roles and responsibilities na ito? Designed the assessment to allow flexibility for teachers in multiple modalities. Kailangan flexible ang modalities, and when we say flexible, we might be talking of time, no? Baka hindi kayang tapusin ng 2 days, bigyan natin ng 3 days or 4 days yung bata to finish the task. That forms part of flexibility. If the modules are requiring these ingredients, for example, or materials, and these materials are not readily available, for example, art paper, flexibility includes the use of other materials, no, na makikita lang doon sa bahay nila in replacement of art paper, for example. So yung pag-localize, yung pag-localize ng activity, not only the activities, but the materials to be used in the activity, for example, ay pwede ding i-localize. So flexibility, it is still forms part of flexibility sa teacher. Communicate to the learners and parents or guardians the design and standards for grading and the assessment. So nakita natin sa Appendix E, sample weekly home learning plan, grade 7. So ito yung mukha ni and you might also want to make use of the weekly home learning plan to inform and communicate to the learners and parents paano ang assessment, kailan mag-assess, ano yung design, what are the expectations, what are the standards. So you might also want to communicate. Set up mechanisms to monitor and record progress remotely through text. Pwedeng sa module checkan mismo, no? But if okay lang na hindi na hintayin yung mga modules para lang ma-checkan ni teacher lahat kasi burdensome para sa atin lahat yon. But if you can make a mechanism to just probably text or call them, ano yung mga hindi pasado na activities kasi magde-decide ka kung magbibigay ka pa ng extra or not. So yung sinasabi natin at saan siya nahirapan. Give timely, constructive, and relevant feedback. Timely is a very relative word. Depende sa location, depende sa situation ng community. We can have our feedback kung talagang malayo, no? Siguro after a week or after 2 weeks. Merong mga feedback na pwede nang i-text sa'yo kaagad, no? So yung pagiging timely natin is dependent on the context ng community. And if you are to ask me how timely is timely, the timely, again, the word timely has to be checked, no, doon sa contingencies na meron ng school LCP natin kung paano niya i-deliver yun. And facilitate remediation for learners who need further guidance, which is in the form of individual learning monitoring plan or ILMP. Kita natin, learner is not making significant progress. Learning is making significant progress. Learning has reached mastery of the competencies in the learning plan. This will tell the teachers, this will tell us, or this should be used by the teachers to inform the parents, no, kung nagpo-progress yung anak nila o hindi. Nakalagay pa rin naman sa DepEd Order number 8 natin that full blast remediation should start at the 5th week of the quarter. At pumasok na tayo sa 5th week of the quarter. So there is an expectation na medyo nalalagyan na, no, ng laman yung individual learning monitoring plan natin. For the parent, communicate with the teacher kung binigyan ang parent ng WHLMP kasi we have to define para saan to, para ano bang value nito sa akin as a parent. So dapat meron din siyang ginagawa, may added value doon sa WHLP natin. Guide their children accomplishing the monitoring tools designed by their teacher. The learner is expected to be proactive. So both the parent and the learners are supposed to inform their teachers, no? Ma'am, hindi po kaya ng 2 days yung task. Ma'am, sa weekly home learning plan po natin, dapat activity 6 na po siya, pero nasa activity 2 pa lang. Kasi po medyo nagkasakit, kasi po medyo nahihirapan dun sa pacing ng activities. The parents are expected to inform the teachers, no? uh, with reference to the weekly home learning plan, ganun siya ka-importante. We also have a tools for sample reflection tool, and Annex E, nakalagay dyan. Ano ang asignatura ang napag-aralan mo ngayon para sa mga bata? Kamusta ka sa aralin ngayon? May mga gusto ka bang itanong? So, this is a non-mandatory form nakalagay sa DepEd, sa interim policy natin. This is not mandatory. However, we recommend na we use this tool kasi mahalaga ito. Kung nakita niyo yung mga tanong, these questions are not questions about the topic. These are not questions about the lesson. These are not questions about competencies. These are metacognitive questions para malaman natin saan nahihirapan ng bata as teachers. Again, assessment for learning para makapag-decide tayo on what to do next. Meron din sa mga magulang, nagawa ba yung ng anak ang gawain? Kamusta ang pag-aaral ng anak? So, again, metacognitive pa rin yung mga tanong. Hindi pa rin siya nahihirapan ka ba pagsagot sa module? No, hindi naman ganun, no? And of course, para sa mga guro, ano yung komento at ano yung sagot. Now, for the basic principles, again, assessment should be holistic, authentic, naka-scaffold siya, MELT-based, formative scaffolds, authentic, zone of proximal development, at mas malapit sa experience. Assessment is integral for understanding student learning and development, or assessment as learning. Dapat opportunity to reflect. See a variety of assessment strategies is necessary, with formative assessment taking priority to inform teaching, or assessment for learning. The teacher should be able to decide on what to do next using the results of the formative assessment. And assessment and feedback should be a shared responsibility dahil may responsibility na yung parent and learner. And lastly, assessment and grading should have a positive impact on learning. So dapat meron siyang ina-expect beyond grading or assessing. So let's talk about the grading system. For assessment of learning, we have two remaining components, the written works and performance task. Wala na si quarterly assessment. Wala na si periodical test, no? But again, if you are to ask me if private schools are allowed to have their periodical assessments, yes. By virtue of DepEd Order number 13 and DepEd Order number 17, they may deviate from the interim policy as may be required by their unique vision, mission, or core values, but this is still subject to the approval of their regional offices. Kasi may mga private school na nauna nang mag-open prior to the release of the interim policy, and therefore they were given the chance to deviate as practice before, because the private schools have their own manual of operations and they may decide which grading system to adopt, but again, upon the approval of their respective regional offices. Pero dalawa na lang. Sa public school, wala ng periodical test. Ang sinasabi ng ating policy, in lieu of the days for periodical assessment, that the learners can actually have their actual performance on those days, or give them an opportunity to practice and redo their task. Mga teachers, may judicious ang leniency na binibigay sa teacher. Ibig sabihin, you have the discretion to decide whether ipaparedo pa ba natin yung activity doon sa bata or not. But we have to be very careful sa mga decision na to. It's about giving the children the time, the opportunity to redo and practice more. Kasi nga, hindi naman natin basta-basta lang binibigay yung summative assessment until we have assured that they are ready for it. So chances are they might they have parang passed on all the formative assessment and then they failed in the summative assessment, which should not happen, no? Or they are parang the the results are fluctuating in the formative assessment and then biglang hindi pumasa sa um, summative assessment, which means to say that some formative assessments are enough na to provide prerequisite skill to pass the summative assessment. These are the scenarios that might happen. Pero para maiwasan natin, again, we carefully plan for written works and performance tasks, and then you provide learners whenever necessary, if you feel like it's necessary, if their reasons are valid, to give them chance to redo or practice more for the performance or written works sa kanilang as that form part of the summative assessment. Sa weight distribution natin, since nawalan sa periodical test, si 20%, so written works na lang nga, and nailatag na kung ilang percent per learning area per component. The same din sa ating summative assessment for senior high school. Kung makita natin sample computation, we have 4 written works and 4 performance tasks. Makita natin sa policy that we are actually just required for written works and 4 performance tasks minimum. Ikaw ba ay magdadagdag pa ng performance task based on the iset na minimum na 4? Kung gusto mong magdagdag, hindi basta-basta magdadagdag. You have to look into the MELCs. Tingnan natin and decide, sinasabi ba ng dynamics at nature ng MELCs na kailangan pa nating magdagdag ng performance task? Hindi lang dahil gusto nating sumobra sa 4, o hindi lang dahil gusto nating magdagdag. We look at the nature of the competencies that we would like to assess, in order to decide whether to have more than 4 performance tasks and more written works. So yun yung basis natin. Hindi siya basta lalabas lang o inventohin lang natin para madagdagan. Para masabi natin na maraming ginagawa yung bata, or nakita natin na kulang ba? Kulang pa ba yung mga summative assessment or experiences para mas matutunan niya yung lesson or your topic, o para mas ma-achieve niya yung standard? Then it's up to you. But again, with reference to the most essential learning competencies. Sa performance task, kailangan clear and directions and appropriate scoring tools. Bibigyan ko kayo ng konting idea later. Pero, or additional lang naman, kasi we have to refer to Annex C for sample scoring tools. But what happens before referring to scoring tools or before creating your rubrics? There is something pa na we have to understand, and then referring to unpacking competencies and unpacking standards. And these are beneficial skills that we have to possess as teachers, para maintindihan natin yung tamang pag-scaffold ng ating mga performance tasks. Kung magko-contribute yung PT1 sa PT2, si PT2 sa PT3, meron bang tahi at meron bang tuhog ang mga PTs na ito? That is something we have to carefully plan. Teachers are advised to collaboratively design. Yes, you may sit down together and plan for an integrated performance task, which I will elaborate in the next few minutes. Learners must be given flexibility, as mentioned earlier. Localize the materials, yes. Bigyan ng extension ng deadlines, yes, pwede. Mababago ba yung activities if the formative assessment results are telling you to provide more, or telling you not, or telling you na enough na siya? So yun yung mga basis natin for flexibility. And teachers must exercise their professional judgment in carrying out summative assessments, providing enough opportunities. At yung sinasabi natin, we can provide opportunities for them to practice more and redo. Summative assessment. They can redo their work whenever necessary. But the discretion is placed upon the teacher, the decision of the teacher. Depende sa professional judgment niya, kung kailangan pa ba o hindi. Kung kailangan talaga natin tulungan yung bata na mas ma-enhance pa yung performance niya, o kailangan niya i-redo yung task na yun. There are 4 performance criteria with sample indicators. This is not part of the of the interim policy, but we are giving you added value, no, on performance indicators. And if you want also to have additional knowledge or additional siguro information, yung interim policy natin, may kasama siyang resource book. Nakita natin yung resource book, talagang ang yaman-yaman niya. If you want to make use of the resource book, then download the policy including the resource book. Malaking tulong para sa atin yun with planning and facilitating assessments. For the performance criteria, sabi natin kanina, yes, you may refer to Annex C for the rubrics, but what happens before creating your rubrics? We have to know if the performance is under any of the following performance criteria. Are we looking for content? Are we looking for process? Are we looking for quality? Or are we looking for result? Basically, if you can remember a face-to-face setup, magdodrawing yung bata. Magko-compose ng tula, for example, yung isang group, or magko-compose ng ating isang group. And then, magpe-present na sila sa harapan. And usually, the grade lang is the final output. No? The final output. Yung drawing lang. And what if yung mga batang napunta sa group na yon is talaga, hindi naman talaga din lahat marunong mag-drawing. What if yung isa pinili niya by interest, gusto niya kunin yung pagkanta kahit hindi siya talented sa pagkanta, pero dahil interested siya sumali doon, if you gave them the freedom to group, no? To choose a group, no? Pwedeng hindi mainam yung kanyang performance doon sa task na yon. Dahil nga usually yung end product yung ating na nagigradean without parang rationalizing whether the criteria is actually looking for content, process, quality, or result. Puro tayo nandoon sa end quality, for example, no? Na yung pala process pala yung dapat nating tinitingnan. When we talk of content, we look for the degree of knowledge or factual information infused. If we are talking about process, we describe the degree of skill or proficiency. Usually, it's a degree ng skill and proficiency. Describes the degree or quality of event, or describe the overall impact for result. So, apat siya. Taking active or actively, for example, and we're looking for the final performance task or the culminating performance task based on performance standards. Taking actively, pag nakita natin yung process, meron siyang encircled, no, actively. At pag tinignan natin ang performance standards ng English grade 9 quarter 1, the learner actively participates. Exacto. Which means to say that this final performance is looking for active participation. And therefore, the criteria is looking for the process. For the process. Not for the quality, not for the result, not for the content. Because performance standards are created to be assessed in various and multiple levels of assessment. Taking this one for example. So, ibig sabihin, we have to unpack muna, no? For the final performance or culminating performance, we have to refer back to the content standard and unpack the content standard for us to know the correct performance standard, whether we're looking for content, or looking for process, we're looking for quality, or we're looking for results. The learner transfer learning by, this is English 7, appreciation of literature of the past, comprehending texts using appropriate reading styles, participating conversations using appropriate context-dependent expressions, so may correct using sounds correctly, features of speech effectively, and serving correct subject-verb agreement. And these are the modifiers in our standards. And planning for assessment, final product or performance, enable to provide the right assessment and know if we're looking for the right performance criteria. Tingnan natin yung mga modifiers na ito. Kung siya ay process, product, result, no, or quality. Kasi sinasabi nila, kung nakikita niyo yung mga previous trainings on assessment, you can actually escape bad teaching, but you cannot escape bad assessment. So pag nag-assess ka, but you are supposed to assess, for example, sa level ng quality, pero na-miss natin that we're supposed to be grading the process, then there is something wrong with the way we assess the performance task. English 9, the learner proficiently plays. So we're looking for proficiently, the degree of proficiency. No? So again, this is the process. Kasi tingnan mo, no, yung mga bata, for example, naggagawa ng performance. Kung possible yung groupings or differentiated, for example, and then ang grinadean yung huli, pero we are supposed to grade the product. Sa face-to-face, no, with reference to a face-to-face setup, kasi pag nag-groupings dyan, may batang nag-text, may batang nagsusulat, may batang nag-doodle, tapos in reality, dalawa lang yung gumagawa. And then when they presented the final output, ang grade na sa final output when you're supposed to grade the process. Pero not everyone is involved. So paano si actively as a performance criteria? So you have to make sense of those para we can escape bad assessment. Talking about performance task. English 9, the learner competently performs. So yung competence naman sa performance. So we're talking about quality naman. So kung napansin nyo, English 9 pa lang. Actively, competently, proficiently, skillfully, na iiba-iba yung level ng performance sa each quarter. No? Kasi nandun yung authenticity at naandun yung multiple levels ng performance criteria. Math 7, challenging situation. So formulate challenging situation sa math involving sets and real numbers to solve this in a variety of strategies. So how challenging is challenging? So they don't just formulate solutions, but they formulate challenging situations. And challenging is a modifier in your performance standard. So which of the performance criteria should you refer to before you craft your rubrics? I think crafting rubrics is there. But, and you may refer to some other downloadable rubrics na, but you have to make sense muna. What are you supposed to measure? Before you download a rubric or provided kayo ng rubric, you make sense of these rubrics before you use them. No? So, kaya kailangan natin mag-refer back at mag-unpack ng performance standard, content standard, and competencies, no? So we can make sense of everything we do in assessment. Math 7, to solve accurately authentic problems. So ibig sabihin, how accurate is accurate, anong performance level criteria, no? Ang hinahanap natin. Math 7, quarter 4, systematically, accurately, appropriately, nandun siya lahat. Kung wala siyang modifier, for example, we have some nasilip natin yung textbook, no? Very technical kasi, so therefore we are looking for a degree in proficiency, no? So yung mga ganung subjects kapag modifiers are missing. Science 9, conduct an information dissemination activity on effective ways of taking care of respiratory and circulatory systems based on data gathered from school or local health workers. So database. How database is database? No? So are we looking for process? Are we looking for content? Are we looking for quality? Or are we looking for a result that is database? Yun ang magandang pagpaplano for assessment. If you're teaching special curricular programs, kahit yung special curricular programs, they have modifiers in their performance standards. How basic is basic, how acceptable is acceptable, how appropriate is appropriate, how familiar is familiar, how mastery, what degree of mastery, and what degree of creativity, how creative is creativity, how clear is clear. So yung mga ganyan. So journalism, comprehensive, compelling, how compelling is compelling. This have to be carefully designed. This has to be coupled with carefully designed rubrics. And grading and promotion, we have to refer back to DOA 2015. This shall still be used in the grading system. The guidelines on learners report, progress report, as well as promotion and retention shall likewise follow the provisions cited in the said policy. So yung nakita natin decision whether to retain or not based on whether the learner has met one, not more than two learning areas or three or more learning areas, and the basis for retention and promotion is still there. And we still also have to use the um, transmutation table, no, doon sa ating method order number 8. A few slides na lang. I hope you're still learning. Medyo past 9 na. I hope you're still learning, but again, this might not be part of the rollout, but I'm giving you a few strategies para mabigyan ng ng added value yung presentation natin tonight. There are a lot of models, but I'll share with you three. One is interdisciplinary. Kasi when we talk of integration, no, integrated assessment, pag nag-check tayo sa mga references, usually interdisciplinary yung approach. Sabihin, two or more subjects, combine them together. Now, but it's possible pala to combine competencies within the same learning area, which is interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary. Kung titingnan natin yung PPST, RPMS natin, COT indicator 1 is integration of content within and across learning areas. So the integration within the content is possible. And therefore, integration of assessment within the content is also applicable. Interdisciplinary between and across learning areas, yes. And transdisciplinary relating learning areas competencies to real-life situations or government thrust or social issues. No, yung combination na ng lahat, you can do that. For interdisciplinary, I'm sharing with you a project from SDO Antipolo. This is COMPAS, a Compendium of Performance Assessment Strands and Standards. Ang ginawa dito sa bawat grade level at sa bawat learning area, ang ginawa niya para yung integration within the learning area. Yung performance standard, naglalarawan ng physical na kapaligiran. This project is within the entire Antipolo. Parang na-unify, across schools. Yung proyekto sa bawat markahan. Sa first performance standard, although it gives us option, but we also parang come up with a more feasible project, such as making a map of Calabarzon. Tapos pagkatapos ng first grading, itatabi lang siya, hindi siya itatapon. No? Tatabi lang siya para ilabas sa second grading. At sa second grading, dadagdagan lang siya ng mga sagisag. Tapos, itatabi uli siya at ilalabas sa third grading para magdikit naman ng iba't ibang sagisag ng kultura at lalawigan. At itatabi uli siya para sa final ay magkaroon ng exhibit within the learning area, quarters 1 to 4, and integrate ang performances, which in this case is a product, in-integrate siya lahat para walang tapon, walang sayang, at walang dagdag na gastos para sa mga bata. And this is a good project from SDO Antipolo na pinanggalingan namin. Of course, syempre we have to be proud of the project. Integration is meant not just to parang minimize the activities. Although gusto natin ma-ease yung burden ng mga bata, pero secondary na yung pagbabawas talaga ng activity. But the soul of integration is that we would like the learners to realize the connection of concepts within the learning area or the concepts between and among learning area na si science pala ay talagang kadugtong ni math, kadugtong ni English, at hindi sila chunks ng unrelated learning areas or competencies. That's the sole reason. At yung pag-uunti ng mga gagawin to ease the burden, yes, we have psychosocial support system, pero beyond that is that we want learners to create meaning out of what they do. Kaya kailangan makita niyo yung connection ng bawat learning area and within the learning area na activities. Make sense of everything. Doon sa ating interdisciplinary or several learning areas, may sample na na-provide yung interim policy natin. If I'm not mistaken, this is a school in, baka magkamali ako. This is school somewhere in Cavite ba or Batangas? Basta dyan lang siya. Sa senior high school. So ito na yung nilagay na specific ng DepEd, specific example doon sa annexes. Na pwedeng yung different subjects naman, if applicable naman, that the most essential learning competencies can be integrated to come up with a single product or performance. But we are saying, again, we're telling our teachers na yes, we can integrate, pero the integration has to be seamless. Hindi siya pwedeng hilaw, hindi siya pwedeng pilit. So dapat fluid ang pagka-integrate ng mga MELCs to come up with a single para hindi siya, kasi nga ang natin ang purpose natin is for them to establish connections and make meanings out of these connections. And if pilit yung integration, how would they be able to connect this concept? So kailangan yes, we encourage interdisciplinary integration so as to minimize, that's one, para na din sa kanilang mental health. And sinasabi ko nga kanina, because we would like to primarily we would like them to realize meanings, and make meanings out of what they do. Pero then and again, the integration has to be seamless. Kung hindi possible, pwedeng hindi gawin. Kaysa ipilit. For intra, which is a combination of learning environment, thematic approach, competency plus theme, plus learning environment, etc. You can do that. Transform the modular approach, transform the online virtual learning environment into a Department of Tourism, IATF, Department of Health, Department of Energy, Consumer Bureau, Environmental Agency, Publishing House, Media Center, or government. So, for example, the classroom as Department of Energy, classroom as a Consumer Bureau, and others. Combining all the components together, say for example, the theme is energy awareness, so that's thematic. And then you have the activities which are, competencies translated into activities. What is energy? Energy from the sun. And then map out all possible integrations in the languages. For example, writing, reading, or research in math, in art, or thinking processes, such as observing, classifying, experimenting, predicting, inferring, etc., etc. So you can also do this. Map out, because we really have to plan for assessment. If you want to see a sample assessment plan, again, you refer to your interim policy, download the resource book, maraming examples pa doon. Consumerism is a theme and then map out. Environment, water pollution is a theme, you map out. For thematic approach, pag titingnan natin kasi, if we make sense of all the themes, yung general themes na siniset ng ating mga learning areas. First quarter, you might discover that this talks about the self. The second quarter is talking about the family or the immediate environment. The third quarter is talking about society. The fourth quarter is talking about other social institutions. And then you do your performance tasks. For example, taking Aralin Panlipunan, for example, yung first few lessons niya about the self is, sino ako? Kahit ESP, sino ako? Saan ako nakatira? Ano yung pinapahalagan ko sa buhay? Sino mga magulang ko? Ano ang pangarap ko sa buhay? That's talking about the self, AP, ESP. Then pumunta ka sa MAPE, for example, personal hygiene, sa health, personal hygiene. This talks about the self then. Punta ka sa science, sa science, parts of the body. Ano ang parts of the body ng babae, anong parts of the body ng lalaki? Then that talks about the self. Baka hindi lang natin establish, but if you make sense of the emerging themes, no, across learning area, most of the topics actually talks about the self, discovery of the self for the first quarter. Kahit English, uh, discovery of the self. No, so titingnan natin yun. Kahit kinder, pag kumanta ka lang ng 10 mga daliri, kamayat pa, that talks about self-awareness. No? So yun, so you can do thematic approach. And then you have your performance task. And lastly, of course, you can do the component approach, which means to say that you can actually within, nilagay ko to sa trans, as sa transdisciplinary as I parang rationalize the approaches, the combined written works and performance tasks. Meaning to say, you have 4 written works and you have 4 performance tasks. And if transdisciplinary, if interdisciplinary, and um, intradisciplinary will not be applicable in your integration, then you might want to have a combined written works and performance task. Ibig sabihin, yung isang performance task may be parang considered both as a written work and performance task. Depende na lang kung ano yung performance criteria na hinahanap mo. If this is an essay, for example, under the written an essay as a written work and essay as a product, no, under the performance task. Kung siya yung hinihingi ng competency o siya yung hinihingi ng performance standard. So pwede din nating gawin na lang yon na one output is considered written works and performance task, pero depende sa competency pa rin na ina-assess at depende pa rin sa performance criteria or criteria for grading na gagamitin natin. And this is the component approach, which justifies, no, mga ma'am and sir, which justifies integration, performance integration in the interim policy and our policy for in academic ease na pwedeng integrate ang ating mga performances to make sense, not just to minimize the activities or assessment tasks, but for our learners to put value and meaning, no, to what they learn. Kasi sinabi natin kanina, the end result of assessment, ang pagharap mo sa pagsubok sa paaralan ay magbibigay sa iyo ng skill para harapin ang pagsubok sa totoong buhay. That is the purpose of assessment. In closing, the 2 most important I would like to share with you Mark Twain's quotation. It's past 9 na. That the 2 most important days in your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why. And this is my favorite quotation na lagi kong sinishare at the time. Ngayon, no, madalas kong sinishare my lectures kasi yes, you have to find the reason, no? One, why you are a teacher. Second, why you are you a teacher at the time of pandemic? If you are a principal, why are you principal at the time of pandemic? Why are you supervisor at the time of pandemic? Why are you PSDS of this district and not the other district? Why are you school head of this district? This is school, not the other school. Why are you a teacher after na nasa grade 6 ka, dinala ka sa grade 4? There has to be a certain amount of realization because that will give you a sense of purpose. And if you know your purpose, you will never be tired at all. Para sa bayan at para sa bata. And with that, again, maraming salamat and good evening sa lahat. Sana meron kayong natutunan sa ating short presentation tonight. Again, this is not supposed to replace the rollout, but I gave you further elaborations on the concepts and suggested strategies that can enrich, your work as a teacher amidst pandemic. If you have questions, we are now open for the question and answer segment. And if you have questions na hindi natin masasagot, you might want to email me. Or if you want a copy of the presentation, might as well email me. I will provide you a copy. At dito.palomar002@deped.gov.ph. Thank you again. Maraming salamat.
Ayan, thank you so much po, Teacher Lito. Sobrang akalain mo yun kahit 9:00 na po ng gabi. Yung mga viewers natin talagang hindi sila bumitaw.
Oo nga.
Nasa 1,000 plus pa rin po sila kahit na nahirapan sila sa mga signal. Okay, sir, pwede po ba natin sagutin yung mga questions po na na-raise po kanina?
Yeah, no, pero I'll help you qualify the questions muna, no. This might not be the scope of the policy, pero has to do with the LCP or the QMS. Sige, tingnan natin kung kaya natin.
Okay po, sige po, sir. So, number 1 po dito sa akin, yung na-jot down ko lang dahil sobrang dami nila. So, eto po, unang-una, can we allow parents to check the learner's answer in their module?
Okay. Ibabalik ko yung kanina, no, yung presentation kanina. If we deem the activities in the modules as formative assessments, no, pwede naman i-engage yung parent to have the modules checked kung formative assessment. Sabihin hindi siya to be graded. By all means, you can engage them kasi ang nakikita ko lang naman na role na pagpasok ni teacher doon is to provide feedback saan mga activities ka hindi pumasa at saan banda ka nahirapan. Kahit pakita mo yung reflection tool, ganun yung mga sagot Ganun yung mga tanong, no? So sa akin, okay lang kasi wala nga akong issue kahit may sagot sa likod kasi independent. Talagang they're supposed to check on their own. Kaya siya nasagot sa likod.
Apo, thank you, sir. Then, sir, ang sagot dito, mandated po ba ang paggawa ng TOS?
Okay. Si TOS kasi strictly, by practice, ginagawa natin si TOS as a blueprint for periodical exam. So since wala si periodical exam, pwedeng technically, yung technical TOS, pwedeng hindi na siya gawin in the absence of periodical exam. But that doesn't mean that you will not have your own, pwedeng hindi TOS ang gamit, pero you cannot have, you must have an assessment plan at least, no? Kasi ang gamit ng TOS, hindi lang basta yung distribute ng items sa periodical test, but for us to ensure that the cognitive process dimensions are all scattered. I mean, included, na-cover niya ang higher at saka lower thinking skills questions. So, technically, si TOS, kung pinaprepare siya as a blueprint for periodical exam, and there's no periodical exam, then there might be no TOS. But then again, you must have a simple assessment plan. Kung gusto mo ng template ng assessment plan, check mo yung resource book na naka-enclose sa ating policy. Merong mga samples doon. Madami tong examples.
Ayan, thank you so much po. Then the other one, sir, are all the learning tasks in the modules specified for the week need to answer by the learners?
Okay. May OUCI memo, no, on academic ease. Yung pag-lesson ng anxiety ng no. Kasi ang basic assumption, all the activities are articulations of the competencies. Okay siya, principle siya. But there's also a principle that teacher decides based on the result of the formative assessment. Which means to say that if the activities are serving as formative assessments at the same time, if the teacher feels like jumping from one activity to another na or choosing activities based sa naging result ng formative assessment, then she can do so by virtue of formative the essence of formative assessments, and by virtue of OUCI 37 na series of 2020 na pwede academic is na pwede tayong pumili ng mga activities sa modules, no? So pero we have to inform the teacher, no? Or si teacher na pwede kasi sa teacher manggaling na i-update niya na pwede na pong hindi gawin kasi Although na-late yung feedback, pero na-realize ko, kaya naman na ng bata na gawin ito. Pwedeng manggaling dito sa teacher na kahit naka-plan and then may changes, inform niya yung parents of the changes. Pwede naman siya. Parang lesson plan lang din yan eh. If you plan the lesson, pero iba yung takbo ng discussion, sometimes you make modifications. So, ganun din yung dynamics ni weekly home learning plan. If you feel like hindi ka kayanin, pwedeng manggaling na sa teacher na pwedeng hindi matupad yung weekly home learning plan because of some decisions you made out of formative assessment results, or pwedeng manggaling kay parent na kasi iba yung learning pace, yung bilis, at saka yung bagal ng anak niya sa pagsagot. So, pwedeng si parent naman mismo na yung mag-inform na baka pwedeng mas keep yung activities based doon sa pace, at saka, yun na, in consultation pa rin with the teacher kung alin doon ang i-skip na.
Ayan, thank you so much, sir. And then, the last one po, are you in favor of having descriptive grading system or you still prefer the numerical form of grading?
Okay. Ang tanong ay
Descriptive versus numerical.
Yung una, i-qualify ko yung premise.
Are you in favor?
Oo. Kasi if I am in favor, if you're talking about personal opinion, my personal opinion, yes, sana. But the fundamental question kasi in formulating the policy is that, are we all ready for it? Now, are teachers skilled, for this kind of assessment? Kaya na ba natin itas yung waters for this kind of assessment? Ganun kasi mga fundamental question bago natin tsaka may mga consultation bago nilalabas yung isang policy. But if you are asking for a personal, kung personal opinion ko is I would agree na magkaroon tayo ng descriptive. I hope so sa banda roon, no? Malaking bagay na nawala si periodical exam. I think progressive yung assessment, no, sa pag tinignan natin yung step na yon, nagiging progressive yung assessment natin because the periodical exam may actually included in the written works, and that we have to maintain a very authentic, kasi nasa loob na ng bahay. So the assessment tools, the assessment design has to be very authentic. Kaya nawala si periodical test kasi we would like our assessment to be very authentic. And on that line, pag dumating yung araw that we do have qualitative it's a progressive step towards making our assessment talagang authentic na talaga. Pag na natin yun. But for now, hindi natin nakikita na appropriate siya sa situation, sa base of consultation. Pero magandang idea, progressive yung thought na magkaroon tayo ng descriptive in the future.
Thank you so much po, sir. And then, ayan, sige po, 9:30 na tayo. So siguro po yung may mga questions po na hindi namin nabasa at nabalikan, babalikan po namin and then isasend na lang po kay Director dito. And then, I'm sure, masipag po si sir pagbasa ng mga messages. Okay po, sir. So thank you so much po sa isang napaka-komprehensibo po talagang discussion regarding po dito po sa DO31 natin. At talaga po, I'm sure, marami po silang natutunan. So, please po, para po masagot po, makakuha po tayo ng Certificate of Participation, kindly answer po the evaluation na nasa harapan po ninyo.
Salamat uli, no? Oo, yan, yan. Pwedeng bumati.
Yes, sir. Go ahead po.
Yes, oo, shout out sa ating ano, no? Uh, sa ating CI family, no? Headed by ating USEC Dad San Antonio at ang ating ASEC, Ma'am Alma Vittorio. Of course, si D4 natin, Dr. Leila Ariola. Sa mga chiefs at saka mga supervising at senior specialists ng BLT. Magandang gabi sa inyong lahat. Shout out sa mga taga Region 4A Calabarzon, yung mga friends natin dyan. Shout out din sa mga taga SDO Antipolo. Nakatutok talaga sila ngayon. So magandang gabi sa kanila. Shout out kina sa tropa sa AP, Apollo, si Mark, si Chen, saka si Sir Jun Salvatore. Of course, I also like to mention yung mga kasama natin sa assessment hanggang lumang panahon pa kasi natin na of course one of our mentors si Ma'am Mel Rivera, galing din sa BLD yan. Si Ma'am Rosalie Masilang. Nanonood sila. Magandang gabi. Yung power duo na yan. Sa Rowell, sa BCD. Magandang gabi. Shout out daw talaga. Yung mga friends natin, sina Karen, sina Liza. Good evening. Din sila. Nag-encourage din sila na manood. Yung SDO Muntinlupa. Magandang gabi sa kanila.
By the way po, sir, baka po pwedeng malaman ng mga viewers natin yung inyong YouTube channel na meron po kayong episode na ginagawa talaga for this new normal. Ano po yun, sir? Sige, pwede po bang ibahagi sa kanila?
Yeah, hanapin nila yung Dito Palomar. Kasi may old account ako Bagyo, no? Hanapin lang nila yung Dito Palomar. Yung picture ko, ito, yung suit ko yung jacket, tsaka nakasalamin ako. Yung itsura ko doon, yung itsura ko doon, hindi pa nagko-COVID. Ito na itsura ko after COVID. During COVID. Yun. Meron tayong YouTube channel. Dinidiscuss naman natin yung mga issues sa context ng parents. So I think kasi most of the experiences na sinishare natin doon ay galing sa perspective ng parents. So meron tayong episode, for example, ano yung role na ni parents sa distance learning ng anak, may episode tayo tungkol sa learners with special needs. So paano naman yung adjustment na ginagawa ng parents at saka ng teachers na rin siguro sa SPED, no? Pati yung IP, meron tayong episode doon. Tapos may episode tayo tungkol doon sa kung paano ma-maintain na safe yung online learning. Ano yung mga tools na pwedeng gamitin sa mga online applications at saka yung child protection policy, paano siya i-infuse sa online learning. So marami pa. So sana support natin yung channel na yon. Dito Palomar, naka-white na jacket at saka nakasalamin. No, tuloy-tuloy pa rin yung natin. Kasi katulad dito, nagkaroon tayo ng lecture din sa assessment. Pero gusto natin mas may paliwanag sa context ng parents para malaman nila yung value ng role nila sa pag-assess sa bata. So, ito naman yung natin, syempre sa context ng teachers natin. So, I'm also giving lectures on assessment sa context naman ng administrators. No, kasi pag-release ng ating interim policy, nakaka-affect din siya sa mga documents ng administrators, yung mga ESIP nila, yung mga OPCRF nila. May mga implication ito sa mga na-identify nilang success indicators. So mahalaga siya sa planning. So if you are interested in talking about the implication of the interim policy on instructional supervision or administration, pwede nyo kong i-email. na natin yung free time. Libre naman. Wala naman tayong ano. So, yun. Again, pakihanap si Dito Paloma sa YouTube.
Yes
Gusto niyo
po.
lang dagdag na info. Ano?
Actually po sir, gustong-gusto ko po yung inyong ginawa, yung sa examine kasi eto yung context ng assessment at ng grading system na ipinaliwanag ninyo sa konteksto ng mga magulang. So siguro yung mga teachers po natin dito, pwede nyo po yung ipanood, pwede nyo po i-share yung link po na yon sa GC po ninyo, sa mga parents po ninyo upang mas lalo po nilang maintindihan kung ano po ba yung grading system, yung assessment na ginagawa at ginagamit po natin ngayong nasa new normal tayo. Kaya sobrang thankful po kami, Director Lito, na pinagbigyan niyo po yung paanyaya namin na makasama po namin kayo ngayong gabi. Kahit po
Oo nga.
alam natin, sobrang overload yung morning, yung araw natin sa dami ng trabaho, but still you made it po para po talaga sa mga teachers natin.
Oo, kasi malaking tulong talaga to. Lalo na pag kinakaskade yung policy ay kailangan siya kasi talagang i-contextualize sa totoong trabaho ni teacher. No? And make sense kasi although this is just interim policy and assessment, we have to make sense of its relationship sa iba pang issuances, kung paano makakatulong yung learning support aid, yung policy sa learning support aid, paano makakatulong yung DMCI sa strategies on distance learning delivery, yung memo natin sa academic needs. So, kailangan magtagpo-tagpo siya. Kasi iba-iba yung policy na gagaling sa iba-ibang bureau at strands sa CO. Pero pagdating yan sa baba, naka-funnel siya sa school, specifically sa teacher. So, kailangan natin ng mga sessions that would make sense of all this policy at i-neutralize siya sa level ng, paliwanag siya sa level ng teacher. So, salamat talaga din na na-invite ako dito sa session na to.
Opo, thank you so much. Pero shout out ko lang po si Teacher Mildred Balolong. Sabi niya po kasi kanina, sana daw po morning ginawa kasi tumatawid pa daw po sila ng ilog at umaakyat ng bundok. Sorry naman po kasi yung goal po talaga namin, bakit po gabi namin ginawa? Alam po namin na sa araw ay sobrang busy po ng lahat ng teachers. And we don't want po na i-interrupt yung ginagawa po natin. Particularly po nagtuturo yung mga teachers and everything. So, gabi po yung naisip namin. So, sorry po talaga Ma'am Mildred kung kailangan nyo pa pong tumawid sa ilog at umakyat ng bundok. Sana naman po safe po kayo. Wala pong mangyaring masama po sa inyo. At yung mga nawawalan sir ng signal, pero talagang alam mo po yun, bumabalik at nanonood po talaga sila.
Oo nga. Sorry din, medyo na-late yata tayo ng 13-15 minutes patas ng technical error kasi talagang yung panahon medyo nakikigulo.
Pero okay lang naman po sir. Naging smooth naman all throughout.
Yes.
So, with that po sir, maraming salamat po on behalf of the 21st Century Teachers po sa pagbahagi ng inyong kaalaman ngayong gabing ito. Thank you so much sir.
Maraming salamat uli sa 21st Century Teacher for inviting